writing to see how is Sid Caesar's last name spelt, because I don't want to humiliate myself, having the spelling in the book. And then I go over there, and then Donald Trump sets the world on fire, and Elon Musk is, here's him burning a kitten. And I'm like, oh, how am I supposed to concentrate on Sid Caesar's last name when, like, all of these horrible things?
First I got your voicemail, then I got you. We can meet in person or maybe on Zoom. So tell me what's your genre, tell me what do you do. I'd like to know the things that specifically make you.
Hey, I'm Tim Barnes, You Are the Genre, and in every episode of this podcast, I ask a great new guest about the first genre that inspired them, the first craft that they pursued, and how they feel about that first pursuit now. I do that because those three questions are genuinely my favorite things to ask creative people, and I find that they help guide anyone towards the things that they actually want to be doing. Sometimes it's not the person I'm interviewing. Sometimes I hope it's you, the listener. I'm doing things a little bit differently this episode for the sake of speed. I'm sure everyone, at least in America, is dealing with the chaos that is our times. I'm in one of those positions where any wrinkle to my schedule becomes a whole train wreck, basically. So there's not going to be that little break in the middle of the show where I kind of say some other things. So I'll say it now. This is a listener-supported podcast. And if you've been enjoying it, there's a few ways that you can support it. You can leave a nice rating or review. You can subscribe to the newsletter associated with it. You can do that for free. Or you can upgrade to paid, which gives you advanced episodes of the show. Advanced episodes this week will include my conversations with comedy writer and filmmaker Ryan Perez and journalist/news curator Philip Lewis. Really great conversations. I can't wait for you to listen to them. Oh, and I'm going to try and speed up the release of a conversation with Felipe Torres Medina, who's a writer for The Late Show and has a great new book out called America, Let Me In. So on the subject of books, that's a great segue to talking about Nathan Rabin. I interviewed him years ago when we both lived in Chicago, and now we both don't live there. So it's great to catch up on what we've been doing in between. He is the coiner of the phrase Manic Pixie Dream Girl. He's one of the most profound writers for the A.V Club, and he's written multiple books, including The Big Rewind, My Year of Flops, which I have on my bookshelf, Weird Al, the book, You Don't Know Me, But You Don't Like Me, which was named a Best Book of the Year by both Slate and Rolling Stone, and most recently, 7 Days in Ohio, Trump, The Gathering of the Juggalos, and The Summer Everything Went Insane. I recall there being some, background noise in this conversation. I hope that's not too distracting. And it was fantastic learning so much more about Nathan Rabin. Since this episode is not going to include the end credits, I just want to give a shout out to Freddie Nunez, who created and sings the You Are the Genre theme song, and Adam Smith, who produced it, and let you know that you can follow Nathan Rabin at nathanrabin.com or on his Substack newsletter, nathanrabin.substack.com. So here it is. Please enjoy my conversation with Nathan Rabin. Where are you living now?
I am living in Alpharetta, Georgia.
Georgia, much cheaper than Chicago, I imagine.
Well, we're in a very pricey neighborhood.
Okay.
I have two special needs children.
Got it.
So your your life is determined by your children.
Yes.
Particularly like what has the best. Until RFK Jr.
Oh yeah, there's so many things.
The heart and soul out of our schools. Everything is terrible. But no, so it's I lived in Decatur for a while. I've been down there like 10 years or so.
Well, yeah, there's so many things to be fearful for, but let's avoid that. I guess how old are your kids?
One is 10 and the other is 6.
Okay. How do you? That is interesting to me, and I'm at this age now too, where I'm starting to be like, where do I draw the line between these lofty things that I dove into in my youth, entertainment-related things, and real life? How do you grapple?
Well, I'm very lucky in that my wife is very successful. So she allows me to flounder professionally for years and years and years. I hope someday to turn that around. But no, I mean, that genuinely is like my wife is a therapist. And she does very well for herself, and she has a really great education. And yeah, she has master's degrees from the University of Chicago and Brown. But as well as that, I get to write about Stephen King all day because he does useful things that serve society and serve a purpose, and I just engage in random nonsense.
Yes, behind every writer engaging in random nonsense is a powerful therapeutic.
Yeah. She knows all of the things that I don't, which is a great deal.
That's great. So you do have this well-known focus on pop culture and entertainment, and you love to, I guess, sift through the garbage of the things that were made to consume and find gold.
Yeah. Or just shiny crap. Shiny. Yeah, that's weird. I once did an interview with the stars of Footloose, the 2011 version, and for some reason it was a Ridley Field. And it was very, very strange and very surreal. And Julianne Hough was the female lead. And I remember saying, like, you are so shiny. Like that is what like a really beautiful woman is. Like her hair is shiny, her skin is shiny, just like she kind of has this weird glow. Sabrina Carpenter also has that quality. I went to Dunkin' Donuts yesterday, and I'm like, yeah, she shimmers,
There is something about that, and there is something too that's like it's weird, this shift. Like, there are numerous people that I met in Chicago who have since gone to Hollywood and become celebrities. Same in when I moved to New York, people that I would see in the open mic scene, and now a glow emerges. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just, it is the beauty of having, I don't even think it's like an ego thing, but it is once you are in a position where enough people are projecting a sort of goodness towards you, I think that starts to shine out.
Yeah, that's kind of like The Last Dragon. You get the glow.
Yeah.
But it literally takes you the entire film to get the glow. That's the kind of a rip-off, but it's kind of a good thing. Yeah, I just thought that recently. Oh, so much fun.
Oh yeah. But with all these things that Nathan Rabin is known, there's a lot of assumptions that could be made about what the first genre was that called out to you. But, you don't have to, I'm not trying to tee you up to give me a surprise, but I'm just curious to know if there is a surprise as to what the first genre was that called out to you.
This probably is not going to be this. Again, there's kind of a through line through my entire life. Like all I wanted to do is be a film critic. All I wanted to do was be a writer. Since I was 14 years old.
Specificity.
And before that, I kind of went through the things that every child does, or they kind of have these fantasy things that they kind of, circle in their mind for a month or two. I think for one reason I wanted to be a police officer. I think maybe because there were a lot of police officers on TV and it was portrayed as a cool, exciting, hip.
Yeah, and you wanted to write tickets.
Yeah, probably. And not, that you would be a force for evil in the universe. Until you're 13 or 14. I kind of learned early on, the police are not your friends. Doctors are not your friends. Avoid authority figures as much as you can. Sit in the back row, try and be conspicuous. These were all important. And then I got really obsessed with politics for a while there, and again, I was like 9 years old, and I could tell you who Benjamin Harrison's vice president was. And I had this weird and the shocking term. I turned out to be autistic, but I had this comprehensive knowledge of all of this weird shit that had no inflect on me whatsoever. I knew that Grover Cleveland was, before Donald Trump, the only non-consecutive president to serve non-consecutive terms. Looking back, I think my dad was like a history geek, and I loved history, and I don't know, cops and the president. Those are the people that you're supposed to want to be.
Well, I like this sort of imagined origin story where you did become a cop. One day you pulled over a literary agent, and the way that you wrote the ticket, the tactful prose.
I like that. I like that. Oh, definitely. God, I think I wanted to be an actor for a little bit. I mean, I talk about this in my 2009 memoir, The Big Rewind. But I got casted in the role of Peter Frank in The Diary of Anne Frank in our 6th grade production. And I think maybe because I was, a little nervous and anxious. I wasn't the world's greatest actor. I wasn't the most prepared actor, but I threw in a lot of comedy and a lot of improvisation. And I learned that that's not really appropriate. Like you make an irrelevant movie, you can improvise. You do it in Apatow. You're on stage in Chicago, you can improvise. You're dealing with the Holocaust.
Yes.
Also, I don't know, I was a 10-year-old person playing like a grief-stricken 53-year-old. So that was kind of out there. God, I think I'll sort of weird. Like my son kind of fantasizes about being an actor as well. He recently portrayed the role of Nana in a Peter Pan Jr. And again, I've got this is just like. It was a fucking amazing production. I'm like, these kids are talented because there's this evolution. And again, my son's the 6th grade, so you're starting to, get to be who you are. Sort of middle school looms horrifyingly in the future. And I just kind of like you go from seeing a production of their child in which it's a victory if they remember their lines, and then the other person remembers their lines. She's like, wow, these kids, like, I want to get the girl's autograph because she did a really good Peter Pan.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and I'm like, I'm a professional critic, and you fucking rocked as Dr. Hook. Captain Hook, the inspiration for Dr. Hook there. And I not to brag again, but I was an extra in the movie Rookie of the Year.
Really?
I think I'm actually a Rookie of the Year and Life Itself. I think if you look very closely, I'm in one of like the funeral scenes for Roger Ebert.
That is so cool.
Yeah, and then if you got like a telescope, you can see me in the crowd. It was like it was at Comiskey. It was a big Sox fan, and Daniel Stern was the director. Very interesting. And they're like, stay fast the game so you can be in a movie. And I'm like, woohoo! And then I think I found comedy very very quickly. I think kind of the first sort of comedy things I really responded to were Mad Magazine. That was extremely my shit. That was sort of played a very important role in sort of establishing my sensibility. I like to think that, there's kind of a journey that all geeks go through. And it kind of starts with Mad, and then Yankovic, and then The Onion. They may be tries are involved at some point. Saturday Night Live. There's this whole kind of thing. Monty Python. There's this whole kind of thing that you have to warn about. From the time I was like 14, I'm like, I had that mojo historian thing going where like I must learn about the Replacements and Big Star and all of these bands and Velvet Underground that you're told are very important. And you force yourself to listen to them, and you force yourself to like it.
Yeah, and you have a critique. And
totally.
It's amassing information.
Yeah, and I remember I was 14 years old, and my dad had a typewriter. And I wrote my first, screenplay. I wrote something that I thought was a screenplay or could be turned into a screenplay. It's called Bucket of Blood. And it was about somebody whose next door neighbor was a vampire, which I think is just the premise of Fright Night. And then there's also already a movie called Bucket of Blood with Dick Miller in it. But they said, I think from there I'm like, I want to work in movies and film, and if I can trot another of the greatest hits. When I was 13 years old, my family was very poor. My dad got divorced twice, and then he moved. He couldn't get a job, and it's very depressed, and everything was terrible.
So it sounds like that's a point where entertainment becomes an
invaluable form of escape. Specifically, so me and my older sister, who is very smart, very responsible, we wanted to go to the movies, but we did not have enough money to go to the movies. But there was a change jar in the laundry room of the apartment complex that we that we lived at, and it was $3.75 per ticket. So again, this is 1989. So we stole all of that change, and we took it to go see Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
Oh, wow.
And I remember watching it and like having this sort of epiphany, like and like I'm forgetting about all my problems, and I'm so miserable, and I'm so angry, and I have so much, ennui. But just watching this ridiculous movie is like giving me hope and making me feel good and making me feel safe.
That's
and
great.
like I want to be a part of anything that brings people this much joy. And the only time I mentioned it here, but Alex Winter, the guy who's not Keanu Reeves and the Lifetime's Excellent Adventure, is a really great guy, like a documentarian, does lots and lots of stuff.
He is great. Yeah, very, very politically savvy.
Yeah. And I think I worked as a consultant on one of his movies, but showed his kids. Yeah, and again, I'd like to take some notes and I'll watch some cuts and stuff, and I'm so fucking neurotic that I've still never looked at the credits for it to see whether or not I'm listed. And I probably should. I probably should. Like, because there's no downside to it. If I'm like, if I was listening, that makes sense. I did my part, but maybe that wasn't enough. And if I was, you'd be like, holy crap, I can put that on a resume there. But yeah, so that was pretty surreal and pretty exciting. And then Weird Al Yankovic was another huge impact and huge influence on also the Monkees. I remember, there was the year of the Monkees. This is like when they had their reunion, and me and Tom Haber, I thought there's like a freaking conductor at a symphony somewhere, and we were both really into the Monkees and really into Weird Al Yankovic. So I got very excited when Weird Al Yankovic opened for the Monkees, and I remember saying to my dad, like, Weird Al was so amazing, we could have just like left after him and like been very satisfied. So it was very fortuitous that I would grow up to be somebody who would write for the A.V Club and then collaborate on multiple books with Weird Al Yankovic.
Yes, well, I think it's interesting. Like, a lot of the things that you mentioned are projects where it is so clear that there's writing involved. Like from Mad Magazine. I'm trying to think of some of the other things that you mentioned, but many of the TV shows, they're TV shows and movies where the writer is very, even like Saturday Night Live. I feel like people are very aware that, writers came up with this. It's not one of those shows or projects where there's this illusion that somehow this is just magically happening.
Yeah. That's interesting because I mentioned that because I have a complicated relationship with a lot of popular culture, but particularly Saturday Night Live. Because last year I had this what turned out to be a very crazy, unfeasible idea to watch every single episode of Saturday Night Live in preparation for their 50th anniversary. And I got and again, I don't want to blame everything on the various neurological conditions that I have, but I'm bipolar. So I now get very, very excited about ideas, and I think they're wonderful. And I'm like, I can't tell anybody because then they'll steal my wonderful idea. And it turns out that nobody was going to steal my wonderful idea. I'm watching every episode. I think there's like 1,000. And it's not like, it's like a short, like I could watch 1,000 Bugs Bunny shorts. I could watch 1,000 episodes of The Simpsons, but the longest show on television. Like, it's 90 minutes every week for a half century. And so I'm still sort of anticipating writing a book about the worst and the weirdest of Saturday Night Live because that's kind of where my heart is. And there's just a bunch of weird crap, like, the fact that Gerald Ford's press secretary hosted. And again, it's a fascinating thing where they're like, we're going to fuck the board administration by tricking their, press secretary into appearing on the filthiest episode of Saturday Night Live. So I thought it was just, they were very self-congratulatory. Oh, and then they also did this thing before, in the episode before the 1776 election, was they reran the footage of Gerald Ford pardoning Richard Nixon.
Oh, wow.
And they took some pride in playing a small part in him being defeated. Even though he was their best pal, even though they hung out with him. So no, I got that genuinely was kind of audacious, and that definitely was taking a stand. And I think I read that Elon Musk and Donald Trump were both invited to the 50th anniversary, and that was enough. Like, I was already not going to watch it. I will watch it eventually. I take my time, but I'm like, that's enough for me to forfeit that, because that speaks to the fundamental weakness of Saturday Night Live, which is safety, and this the fact that like Warren Michaels thinks that it's possible to be bipartisan And 2025, I think, is a form of madness. If you get that, you be bipartisan when fucking Donald Trump has hosted your show twice when he's charged. Again, it's very surreal. But that was another thing that kind of played a huge role in my sense of humor. And I remember, being like 13 and seeing Wayne's World. The movie theaters, I lived in Chicago at the time. But I'm like, this speaks to me on such a profound level. And like, kind of my first heroes were sort of Dan Aykroyd and David Byrne.
I'm curious. So you grew up in Chicago, and for some reason, you've written quite a bit about, how important the year 1999 is in film. The Wachowskis are also from Chicago, and I wonder if you can just kind of what is it about the Chicago aesthetic that creates the media that it creates? Like, even from like the Second City and all that. Like, what do you think it is?
Well, it's interesting too. I feel like I sort of talked about the written word. And us Jews were the people of the book, and I feel like that's kind of the same thing with Chicago, where there is this incredible literary sort of quality. There's all of this ingenuity. There's all this invention. Also, there's just a lot of smart people, like, Chicago. Like, that became this hub, and Mike Nichols and Elaine May and Second City. Like, you have these institutions. And God, you look at Second City, like, it's fucking amazing. They've been the best in the world at what they've done for 50 years. And I guess I've never seen Groundlings. They're pretty good. They got some people who can
It also feels like a specific hub for criticism.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think that's the thing, too. Is sort of Los Angeles was the film business, and then New York is theater and publishing. And then because of Roger Ebert and because of Gene Siskel, Chicago became known as kind of this epicenter of film criticism. And that was very exciting for me. I remember the first time that I was in the screening room. I was 20 years old and I accidentally sat in Gene Siskel's chair.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. That's that autistic thing of just wandering into a situation and getting things immediately wrong. And then, my whole thing was like, I'll sit in the back and that way nobody will notice me. And they'll be like, why is this child watching this movie? I think Wild Things was one of them. And then the other was an Ed Byrne movie.
Oh, yeah.
Because it was written, directed, and starred Ed Burns. I don't remember a goddamn thing about it. Oh, he makes some very, very bland, very boring movies. I had like particularly boring, like no going back or no looking back or whatever. But at one point, so he sort of tapped me on the shoulder and he was like, "Excuse me, young man, you are sitting in my seat. I'm going to point to a seat over there. If you would just, I'd appreciate it." And I was like, "Oh, he talked to me." I shared a student with Roger Ebert for years and years, and and he was my first book, and I never spoke to him because I was just intimidated. I'm just like, I don't have any.
I remember I was in Chicago when he passed away, and it really affected me. Like it felt even at the time like a loss, and it still feels like a loss of a certain type of conversation about film.
Yeah, and I feel like it's kind of like he's like a Studs Terkel like figure. I feel like Studs Terkel belongs to Chicago, and to a much lesser extent the rest of the world. When I feel like Roger Ebert is sort of the same thing, where he's so quintessentially a Chicago guy, and he could have moved to Los Angeles, he could have moved to New York, he could have pursued a career in screenwriting, but no, he chose to stay in Chicago. It meant a lot to him.
When did you learn that you're on the autism spectrum?
About a year ago. And my wife hasn't known, because again, my wife works with people who are neurodivergent, which also why she makes a lot of money. Because there are very few people who kind of understand autism and how to connect with autistic people and how to understand. Because again, that's, it fundamentally doesn't make sense. And that's the thing that's crazy is I feel like as an artistic person, I have a very overdeveloped sense of logic. And I get frustrated when something doesn't make sense, and I have this sense of, again, this is sort of honesty, where it's like you need to tell the truth or you will get into trouble. I don't know what part of that is like being a moral person and just being scared shitless. And part of like I grew up. I felt like you don't write two memoirs about your childhood unless they're really, really traumatic. And I kind of felt like sort of my childhood sort of forced this humility and appreciation on me because I didn't have a whole lot. So the things that I did have, I really, really appreciated, and I'm trying to teach my sons. Two primary gifts. One of them is appreciation, and the other is patience. And then the fun thing, we're also all ADHD. Those are all, everybody, even my dog, I think maybe neurodivergent. Like he's got a lot of the characteristic, not entirely sure. But yeah, so that was about a year ago. It was a very long, exhausting, kind of traumatic experience. I remember like crying the next day. Because you go over everything and it's kind of like a cytological x-ray. And then at the end, they give you a report and they tell you things. I remember one of the things that they said was that I had bipolar 2. And I said, I don't know about that. I certainly do have the attention deficit thing. Like my wife will tell me to do something and 20 seconds later, I'm like, what did you ask me to do? But I said, but I don't have that. I don't have like this crazy upsurge in energy and excitement to feeling blah, blah, blah. And she's like, well, do you pursue a lot of projects that you don't finish? And you start a bunch of things that, are then not, that you then forget about fairly quickly. Like, yeah. 100%. And that was the center of my thing too. It's like I have these big ideas and I lack the judgment to know whether or not they're great ideas or whether or not they're really stupid ideas. Some of my ideas,
it's your process. I guess it feels like a double-edged thing, right? Like I'm sure that in some way it's relieving to have a diagnosis and have answers, and and no one likes a label, so all of a sudden you sort of feel like you've got the stamp on you.
Yeah, well, the weird thing is, I'm hoping to write a book about this.
I'm not going to steal your idea.
That's okay. That's okay. I wrote really not with the fraction year. I wrote a novel. I need to start a live book. I need to write a book about it. And part of it is sort of the way that I got it backwards, where my two sons are both autistic. And that didn't come from my wife's side of the family. And you kind of look at my side of the family and nobody has been diagnosed other than me, but there's a lot of fucking autism. And there's a lot of neurodivergence. And it's one of these things too, where, when I was a kid, autism was the Rain Man disease. And if somebody was autistic, you expected them to look and act like Dustin Hoffman in that movie. I'm kind of doing this project where I'm going through all the autism themed movies, and that was one of the first that I did. Actually, that wasn't. I did a bunch of bullshit that nobody cared about to chase the audience away, and then once they were all not there, I started giving them what they wanted. But it's interesting, in 1988, like, more people knew Rain Man than knew autism, and I think there's a sense of, that if you weren't like that, then you didn't have it. And I think for the course of the last 20 years or so, there's been this dramatic increase in awareness and in testing and understanding. And I think there's this weird thing where it's like, hey, nobody was autistic before, and now everybody's autistic. Is it vaccines? It's like, no, it's that nobody was fucking checking me for autism when I was 14 years old.
Yeah. And I guess it's like, it's more normal than people think.
Very so.
I remember when I maybe 5 years ago, I learned that one of my pediatricians when I was a kid was pretty sure that it was the term have depression or am depression.
I have depression.
Yeah, someone made fun of me once for saying have depression, but I think that's what it was. And it felt relieving to hear that somehow. But then at the same time, I was like, what in the world was she noticing about me as a kid?
Yeah.
To kind of reach that conclusion.
Well, and again, I think people noticed that there was something different about me when I was a kid, but I think a lot of it is just like my mom abandoned me. So I'm like this weird, shy, quiet, insecure child because because of this, fundamental scar, this thing that made me feel like I would never be good enough. And yeah, for a lot of different things, it was just like, oh, I'm depressed, I'm anxious, I have, and it's kind of like they're all paths along the way to sort of understand. But in a weird sort of way, it was very relieving. Because I feel like I get frustrated with myself a lot. And I find myself asking, like, how the hell did I get into this state? Like, I work really hard. I like to think I've had an impressive career. I try to be a good person. And I'm just in this universe of debt. And all of my creative projects seem to fail and all of these things. And, one of the answers is that you're a divergent and that your life is inherently more difficult and that things that are very easy to other people are very difficult for you. I mean, one of those things too is I have, like a lot of people, rejection hypersensitivity. Because I think everybody's like feels bad about being rejected, but like I never get over that shit. But
so a note session, I imagine, is a very complex for you. If it's
it's very I'm not that resilient. It's like I lost my last job in April of 2015. I have not gotten over it.
Oh yeah,
I'm still in a sad place emotionally.
I tend to be a pretty resilient person, but these last few years in the entertainment industry have been like, my God, have I really lucked into having 3 writing jobs in a row, and it just kind of like the lead up to the strikes and the aftermath, and it's not the strikes' fault, just like what's happening with all this consolidation. And that kind of goes back to what you were talking about earlier about it feels like the level of conglomeration makes it so that we have to have this incredibly false veneer where there's so much fear about commenting, about criticizing, about on every level of everything almost, because we're all beholden to stakeholders, and there's this mythical concept of middle America that we don't want to offend, and the risk taking feels like far and whatever the term is, far and few between.
Well, again, I also too, it's like sort of just in the last month and a half or so, sort of after Donald Trump was elected, it seemed like the world changed very dramatically. All of us, seemingly overnight, things went from bad to apocalyptically terrible. And again, there are all these threats that you don't see coming. And as a kid, not a kid, you fear all sorts of things. You don't fear that AI will make you unemployable.
Yes.
You don't fear that somebody will have that some billionaire from South Africa is going to decide that he wants that the government is dumb and he wants to break it.
Yes,
and that becomes our national experiment for the next 4 years. Like, you don't anticipate these. I'm pessimistic, I'm gloomy, I'm apocalyptic. I expect the worst. I've been getting the super worst for a long time. But we're all having it. I'm thinking about this a lot. Where it's such a massive distraction. Where, if you're creative, you have to do these things. You have to write, and you have to listen to things, and you have to watch things, and you have to be engaged. And I'm writing to see how is Sid Caesar's last name spelt, because I don't want to humiliate myself, the spelling in the book. And then I go over there, and then Donald Trump sets the world on fire, and Elon Musk is, here's him burning a kitten. And I'm like, oh, how am I supposed to concentrate on Sid Caesar's last name when like all of these horrible things? And I had to look at it in like Daily Beast. It's something I look at a fair lot, probably, and like every single like story will, and like I don't want to fucking write about Donald Trump. I don't want to write about Elon Musk. I don't want to think about them, but I have to.
You have to.
You know, and I feel like,
very difficult.
yeah, and I feel like if I was writing in Germany in 1939, I'd be writing about Hitler because that was the big thing that was happening. That was fucking everything up, and yeah, thankfully, it's still legal for Jews to criticize the president. But he's doing everything in his power to see that that's not the case. And I'm sure Stephen Miller, the world's worst Jew, is probably behind that. And he looks like a ghoul. He just looks like he looks evil. I mean, I was thinking about it. I was like him and like RFK Jr. And again, it's got that thing with his voice, but he looks unwell. Yes. Like, I don't know who looks at him as like, look at that sexy, dynamic individual. He's fighting for our freedom. It's like, here is a broken man with brain worms and years and years and years of heroin abuse. Like,
the whole cabinet is and he
had like this thing where he was such a womanizer, but he had a diary where he would write down all of the women that he had sex with other than his wife.
My God.
And if he didn't cheat on him, like, he would give himself like a smiley face. So Richie was a good, he was a fucking Kennedy, so it's not that unusual. But the fact that people look at him like, that lunatic is going to make us all healthy, and Elon Musk is going to give us all money and solve all of our problems. And again, it's just this cognitive dissonance where I feel like I'm living in a vastly different world. Because again, I felt like, when I was a kid growing up, it's like Michael Dukakis and George Bush believe in different things, but they live in the same world and they have the same set of experiences. It's not like one of them is like living in this bizarre fantasy land where they're the world's greatest ruler and people bow down before them, and the other, lives in reality.
Is it safe to say that your first official craft was writing?
Yeah. Although I don't want to brag, but I did volunteer for Michael Dukakis in 1988. We called, and I can only imagine how authoritative it was to be like, "Hi, I'm calling from the Dukakis campaign." And the whole idea was, I think we were telling him to like watch him on Nightline or something, some sort of television experience. And
so you honed the craft of calling strangers and saying, "Hey, consider this guy."
Yeah. That did not work out very well.
What was the interest in politics, by the way? Like that called out to you at like age 9, you said? Like, what is it about that?
That is a good question. I'm going to ask about like my dad. He got a degree from history at the University of Chicago. I don't know necessarily. I think it's just, kind of.
Are you fascinated with power?
Yeah. Corruption of power. I think part of it is just narcissism, and just the fact that we are ruled invariably by somebody who thinks they deserve to be the most powerful person in the world.
Yes.
Like that is literally like cost of entry. It's like, I should be the most powerful person in the world. I should be like, how are you going to get anything but create narcissists, and then people who are out for power.
This might be too much of I'm not a therapist. This is not therapy, but do you think there's any correlation between your interest in the mechanics of power and the complexities in your youth?
Yeah, I could definitely see that, and I think also too, like, I never wanted power myself, and I think that is also just like, I don't want the responsibility.
Yeah.
I don't want
which ultimately makes you an incredibly interesting protagonist. But
yeah.
The best protagonists are the ones who don't want the power.
Yeah. Well, I was head writer for the A.V Club for like 15 years, and I didn't have power over anybody. I was just the head writer because I wrote a lot myself. Kind of over from the other. Yeah, they did it. It was very depressing, but they did. This was many owners ago, but they like threw my salary on a whiteboard or something, and they're like, "This is how much you would have made if we just did a freelance work. Wow. So you need to tell us how you're going to make up this blah blah blah." And I'm like, I get paid, and I got paid very little at that point. I got paid like $60,000 a year. So that was very, very.
And it's crazy to think how extrapolating from that, how essentially that has continued to happen.
Oh yeah, but the thing too is like there was regime change after regime change after regime change. So it's like the people that I quit and discussed twice. But thankfully those people are gone, and I'm on my third go around there. And I hope to not quit in disgust or quit at all. And hopefully they won't quit me in disgust either. Because that's always a possibility. And yeah, when I got to be a teenager, I worked in the video store, and that was
a dream job.
Yeah, that was a dream job. Blockbuster Video, and I felt
another place where you can chronicle things. You can
and looking back, like it was a place where I could mask, where I could be the video store clerk, and I could kind of play a role.
Yeah, you are the guy.
And I didn't necessarily have to be the weird introverted. That was like putting on those khakis and a blue Oxford shirt, it turned me into what the heck? I get constant calls from spam.
Oh, I do. Same.
It's not so because they just say potential spam.
Yeah. I just learned that I should block the numbers. And so
yeah. My thing is that if it's not my wife or my mother-in-law, I don't need to talk to them. Also, the only people who are going to call me other than my wife and my mother-in-law are bill collectors.
I once got a spam call, and it haunts me. This was, I think, at some point last year, and all I heard was, "Am I dreaming?" on the other line.
Wow. I'll get a Christopher Nolan movie there. Am I dreaming?
It's like so scary.
Yeah. It's like Lynchian.
Yeah. So what was that first genre of things that you were writing?
I guess probably the first things that I wrote were I fancied myself writing strips. There was your film where I grew up, they had a word processor in the basement, and they had a Journey pinball game, except it didn't work. Somebody was kind enough to send their broken devices to us. And I remember writing a screenplay. I cannot remember anything about it, but I feel like that's sort of everybody wants to be a screenwriter.
How old were you?
I set myself apart at like 18 or so, 19 or so.
18, okay.
And when I went away to college, I started writing about music. Yeah, music was my first love. I got really, really into Britpop. And I wanted to write for Melody Maker or New Music Express and, be the person hanging out with the band, doing drugs, being cool. So you had Blur, Oasis, Elastica, that whole sort of thing. I actually had a letter that was printed in New Music Express. And then I wrote for my college paper, or my junior technical college paper.
What? How long of a period of wandering was it? Was it very quick for you to, get those official stamps of I am a writer?
Well, what basically happened was I worked at the Madison Area Technical College Slant, and what I would do, this was 1996. So what I would do a very long time ago is I would write handwritten lists of Onion headlines because my sister was friends with a guy named Mike Lowe, who was a graphics editor, and she's like, "Hey, my brother's really funny. What should he do for the Onion?" I'd usually be like, nothing, go away. My sister is very charming and appealing, so write a list of headlines, and then if they like them, maybe you'll get invited to a meeting. So I would, because these things, I would write them out in cursive notes and block, and then I would mail them to the Onion, which literally a mile away or so. And Ben Carlin, who would go on to be a very successful, the New Yorker referred to him as John Stewart's brain. Which is impressive considering that John Stewart has his own brain. But he would, he'd tell me why all of my ideas sucked. But then again, be like, but you show some promise, so keep on doing it. So I finally submitted 2 headlines that I think, the 2 were Vatican condemns whack MCs, and the Sklar Brothers give federal government 5 days to pay off national debt. And they both made it into the Onion. I did not write the article there. So I was invited to like be part of meetings, and I went to 3 meetings, and I was shaking like a leaf the entire time. And I'm like, I think these are only like probably 4 or 5 years older than me, but I'm like, these people are gods, and they know everything. And I'm this slowly supplicant. And I would, I'd see my ideas, and the quiver in my voice did not make them more authoritative. And then, at the end of the 3rd meeting, which was the first meeting of Rob Siegel, I just taken over. He would be probably the most important Onion editor, the whole our dumb century kind of era. And this was my first conversation with him. And he's like, yeah, you got some problems here. One of which is you're a little too young. Like you're 20 and, we're not that old, but like difference between 25 and 26 and 20. You don't really have a niche. There's not like one thing that you do that other people don't. Last thing, you're not that funny. So I was like, you know what? I agree with you. I probably never should have been doing.
And I was before you said that rejection is a toughie for you.
Yeah. Oh man, it was terrifying for me. So like no, and then I applied for a job at a video store clerk. I listed the reasons for leaving as creative differences. And they said, the person who was interviewing said, so what were the nature of these creative differences? I said, well, they kind of boiled down to, I thought I was very funny and should write for Onion, and they felt strongly otherwise. So he laughed and then hired somebody else. And then a month later, that person quit. And then I got hired. And then I ended up sort of meeting my mentor through that. And that was kind of my entryway into the A.V Club and to the Onion and into a career as a professional writer, which I started when I was 21 years old. So I very wisely, had all of my success early in my career, so I can save all the failure for the second part.
So when you talk about the video store, you were talking about like that's a position in which you can mask. Do you feel like in some way you mask as a writer? It feels like that is the profession of masking. Like it's a solitary profession, and then
you can present the most polished version of yourself. You can present the version of yourself that is the most typical, the most neurotypical, and particularly like when I was promoting the bigger line, and I had like I got $100,000 advance for it. It was published by Scrivener. They had really high hopes for it, and I did a lot of press and a lot of media, and I became a caricature of myself. I became the performing version of me who tells these stories and blah 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 blah. And you kind of need that, because I have a big autistic, don't talk to strangers. Talking is never fun. Communicating is talking to people other than your family brings about all these problems. And what if they don't like you? What if they reject you? What if you fail in all these things that you do? But yeah, and I think I also had to exist in the world for a long time. And I think about my time at the Onion and how I didn't understand office politics, and I didn't understand the hierarchy, and I didn't understand these relationships and how they're, and at the time I just thought this is just a fucking blind spot for me. But now it's no, that's the autism. And again, I had this adorable idea that if I just worked really hard and kept my head down, good things would happen. And that's yeah, it's just it's depressing. It's depressing when I feel like anytime you try to do something good or worthwhile, the market rejects it. The book that I'm writing now, or that I've nearly finished. kind of my like 10th or 11th draft. But it began as a column at TCM Backlot, which was TCM had their little fan club thing, and it was like for their most devoted of the devotees. And I wrote for them for like 5 years, and nobody ever said anything about my writing there, which is fucking fine, you know, like I'm not crazy going around for that. But then I got to take these pieces with me when I went over to Nathan Rabin's Happy Place and turn it into this massive book, which I am very, very excited about. It's 512 pages now. And I feel like it's kind of the culmination of everything that I kind of worked towards. So beginning with, you know, I was 12 years old, and I'd be, you know, the Roger Ebert guides and Leonard Maltin and the Video Watchdog, and think about like all of these cool movies that I'm going to see at some point. And I was been looking for a halfway decent list of movies about movies. Does not exist on the internet. I wish fucking know. I literally spent years and years and years and years looking for it. So the fact that a massive book will exist that has every single narrative film in there, and then a goodly percentage of documentaries as well. It's going to be unique. So I'm very excited about it.
Nice. You talked about how you had a lack of understanding of office politics, which is funny to me because one of your earliest interests was politics itself. What was the complication with hierarchy? You just like, was it more that you were frustrated with it, or you didn't understand that if I say this in front of this person, it'll probably get to that person?
Well, I mean, I think it's a matter of, like, I just didn't understand sort of social structures. And I think that's kind of a big part of it. And I didn't necessarily know who's the friend and who not to be friend. I remember, God, I had this new employee at some point. And I'm like, I'm going to make her my friend. I'm going to make a concerted effort to be a friend. Like, this is going to be this deal that I'm going to do. And I think I did for a while. And what I came to realize is she was the worst person in the world. And it was incredibly stupid for me to try and be her friend, because she was just surly and unpleasant and, you know, just awful, you know. And it's just like, well, that's... My brain said, hey, that person over there, that'll be your friend. And probably the worst choice that I could have made. So, it's just, it's tough. Because, I think that's, you know, I think I even before I had the autistic diagnosis, I sort of said that I don't understand the world, and writing is my attempt to understand it. And writing is the way that I process things, and writing is the way that, you know, I survive the horrific gauntlet of terrors that currently afflict us at all moments.
So I think that I can assume that that's the answer to the third question, which is, how do you feel about that first pursuit now? The first pursuit was writing, and I'm sure that you're overall grateful. But,
It's funny. It's funny that you say that, because I was actually thinking about this earlier today. I don't know if you've seen the movie Overnight, but if you have not, I very much encourage you to see it. It's a movie, a documentary. That's one of the reasons why I included documentaries in my book, is because I wanted to include movies like this. And it is it's about this guy, Troy Duffy. And he sort of came out of nowhere with a screenplay that was like, be the next Tarantino. And Harvey Weinstein was like, this is my guy. We're going to, not only am I going to buy his, you know, screenplay for $1 million, but I'm going to buy his bar as well. That he worked. Because that was part of his, like, his, you know, his mythology. It's like, it's just scumbag working in a bar. And then I wrote this awesome script. And again, until you look back, you're like, wow, who wouldn't want to work with Harvey Weinstein permanently? And there are all these, like, funny clips of, you know, they're talking about potential people who are those, like, Keanu Reeves could suck my dick. Mark Wahlberg, he fucking sucks. He's not worthy of being in my movie. And he's just the biggest fucking asshole in the world. And the people who made the documentary are people who he fired as the band managers.
Wow. Yeah.
You fire somebody who's making a documentary about you, and you're already the world's biggest asshole. Like, it's going to turn out very, very. So it ends up being this wonderful exercise in Schadenfreude, where he thinks the world owes him everything, and he's going to be, you know, hot shit, and, you know, he's going to be again, the next Tarantino, and everything just kind of fails, and it kind of ends with him working back at the bar. But there is this great moment at the end there after he had this experience with Boondock Saints that was very, very dispiriting and jarring kind of. And he is talking to a group of college students. College film students. And they're, to them, he's lived the dream. He's doing his mid-20s. He made a movie. Dafoe is in it. He's a fucking rock star. And they're like, so what would, what kind of advice would you give to, aspiring filmmakers? He's like, whatever. Don't bother. It's just a waste. Just dumb. People just fail. It's just a lot of assholes or whatever. You're like, but you were successful, right? I mean, through the process, what kind of insight? He's like, I don't know, get another job or something. And again, I hate that I related to that because I went to go see my son and speak to his group. And my wife. Yeah. Very amused that I mentioned being a juggalo. But I said, I have a job that I love and I get to do all these interesting things and it's really creatively satisfying. But there was part of me that's like, you won't make any fucking money. AI will fucking take over for you. You'll get fired from every job that you have. All of the people will go out of business because they're not, sleazy enough, or they'll be so sleazy they can't. And again, part of me wanted to say, don't fucking bother. Get a job as a therapist. That pays very well.
Yeah, the AI isn't catching up to that.
No, yeah. And that's another thing too. Like, what if there's an AIV that's better than the real me? And that's the other thing that's crazy. Is I've been writing in the popular culture on the internet since 1997. So I'm guessing that some of these AI models are taking things from me just because I have a voluminous amount of content on the internet. So it's weird to think that the me of 2025 is competing against the more successful me of 2007 and 2006. All sorts of weird results.
I hope that the human factor. I hope that we quickly realize that the human factor is important, because the concept of just being fine with an article that didn't have any human involvement or a critique that didn't come from, I don't know. There's something very bizarre about that I'm very obsessed with right now about that specific thing. But so you have a conflicted feeling about that pursuit, but at the same time, it feels like there's nothing else that you could have done.
Right. Well, that's the thing too. It's the only. I fucking love it. I just wish I made more money and was more successful, and when I had a project, it would succeed, in an unambiguous way, instead of just having to grind and have things sort of work out kind of the way that you wanted, and have other things just fail. Because the other thing too is it's weird. You're reading Kanye's latest anti-Semitic rant. But it was even by Kanye standards, it was terrible. But a lot of it too is just these people are winners, blah 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 is a loser, blah 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 blah. And I'm I don't subscribe to this cult of winning and this cult of success and then there was Donald Trump. It's there was a fucking helicopter crashed into a plane, and that turned into Joe Biden lost and I won. And it was all his fault, and I'm going to do amazing things, and I'm a winner, and he's a blah, 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 blah. And again, it's just there isn't a winner and loser in every situation. There shouldn't be. And I think that's a capitalist idea.
And also having, I don't know, there are downsides to having the most people liking you as well.
Totally. And again, you talk about sort of the fact that Elon Musk was bragging that the Doge people were working 120 hours a week. And here's that theoretically sounds good if you're insane or you're on a lot of meth. But if you were to work 120 hours without literally being on cocaine or you would need fucking stimulant to be up that working all of that time, your brain is fracturing. Like you're going crazy, you're hallucinating. Like human beings aren't supposed to do that. So the idea that, and also like, gosh, if I can go back to weird, obscure things, Vivek, his last name, I cannot pronounce.
Yeah.
I'm actually racist and mangle it. He has a wonderful name. That's not my problem with him. But he had a tweet where he's saying like our cultures are all messed up. Like you need to stop glorifying, I don't know, some TV thing, and start looking up to Urkel. He also said we need like less movies like, I don't know, Wicked, and more movies like Whiplash. And again, I don't know if you've seen Whiplash.
Yeah.
But the moral of Whiplash is that being aggressive and competitive drives you crazy. It breaks your brain. It breaks your body. You're not doing anybody any good. It's a form of masochistic mental illness. So the fact that he watched this movie and thought like, oh, this is why it's good to work hard. And if you have good goals and like you're really ambitious, it's like, that is the exact opposite of it. And yeah, it's like that whole, like, I was shocked to discover Rage Against the Machine doesn't agree with my right-wing politics, or the whole, since Bruce went woke, I can't follow him anymore.
Oh, that's a perfect intersection of your love of politics and your love of pop culture. I tend to think over the past few years, I've been trying to figure out, like, what is the actual purpose? Which is, I think, our times. It's very sad that our times has made, I think, a lot of people think this way. What is the purpose of the arts? What is the practical purpose of it? And it's taken me back to the village concept of like, what is the value of these different types? Like even talking about the autism spectrum, what is the value of this? And I think there is like such an important value to like the person who chronicles things in the village, the person who has this obsession with the history of, the person who can tell the story at the campfire, or the person who can, and I think we've gotten so far away from that, where it's all of these like bizarrely, very alien, almost very, very technologically focused things that are front and center, because those are the things that allow you to make the money that you need to survive, that we're alienating ourselves from these basic things that are of value. Like it's very scary.
Oh, totally. I mean, I think that's something that I wrestle with in my own life, is that, I'm really proud of the work that I do. I have put a lot of work and effort and thought into it. Yet its value in large part is determined by how successful it is. So I had this Center Live idea that, if I had gotten $100,000 for my crowdfunding campaign, and so we have $5,500, like, that's a success.
Yeah.
Like, I would see it as having a lot of value. Other people see it as having value. Because it didn't do well, that led me to not value it. It's like the same thing, like with, when I was writing The Weird Accordion Al, my obsessive exploration of every song on every album that he did, it was really unpopular. Like, it got very, very few. Like, there were two people who would like share it, and I like knew them by name, and I appreciated it, and then it turned into a book, and it was a big success. And I sold thousands of copies, and then there was a spinoff, and that was a success as well. And I kind of took up this place and the culture, and Weird Al was very kind to it. So I really valued that very, very highly. And because I like the book, and I think it's very worthwhile, but also because it was successful and I made money off of it, and I sold lots of books, and that's a really great feeling. And I really hope that The Fractured Mirror sells a lot of books, because it's really good, and hopefully that will happen. But yeah, I gotta not inherently associate success with money and professional accomplishments and all of these things. And sometimes it's enough to, feel like I did something good. And then the world doesn't have to love it. Like, it's just enough for me, and I've yet to get to that place. That gives me something to aspire to.
But there is you haven't got to that place where the personal success outweighs the accolades. But you know what that feeling is when you've completed something and it's to your liking and you're proud of this.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's the thing too. Is it's the joy comes, the sense of satisfaction of a job well done, as opposed to the rewards of your labor, because they're fucking hard. And I make my living blogging and self-publishing, and I had to burn bridges. I just let them atrophy, and then they fall on the core.
Do you think that
I let shabbily built bridges crumble of their own accord? Not burning bridges, not even aggressive enough to do that, just passively letting them crumble.
Do you feel that the stigma of self-publishing is kind of dwindling?
Yes and no. I think the fact that I've done this that I've published books with Scribner and Adams, it's like, well, it's sort of like, being a musician. You sign to Capitol, and maybe you do 2 or 3 albums with Capitol, and Capitol says, hey, you had to sell 3 million copies or you wouldn't make a profit. So we're dumping you. So, you go to an independent label, and that's not as prestigious. It's not as big as being on the being on Capitol. But, I still have that, I'm still able to take the relative success that I experienced, writing for The Onion, writing for The Dissolve, writing for Scrivener, writing for
Long live The Dissolve, by the way.
Yeah, that was heartbreaking. Totally got fired a month before they went out of business.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's the job that I never got over. I also do it being like, I will always, I will always, be employed and have salary because I'm too neurotic to ever do things the freelance way. It turns out you don't get a chance. So sort of by default, I've been doing things the freelance way since then. And creatively, it's very fulfilling and very satisfying. And monetarily, it is a waking nightmare. And emotionally, it is incredibly difficult. And I don't think my fragile ADHD brain was necessarily built for a business as difficult / impossible.
Yeah. Well, here's hoping for a brighter future for us.
But then I got big ideas and I've got books that I'm really proud of. I just have no idea what the reception will be. And that's scary. I'm not John Green, who I came up with in Chicago. I haven't sold 14 million copies. I could sell 14 copies of my next book. That is a terrifying possibility.
I'm sure it'll be more than that. I'm sure it'll be more than 14.
It will. Yeah, I've got the core of readers. And I think hopefully when people see this, they'll be really nice. And they'll spread the word.
Yeah. But there is something to, and this will kind of be the last thing. I know we're kind of going over time here, but there is a specific satisfaction to the release itself, because I feel like it explains what you've been doing over, over the year or so that it's taken to write it.
Oh, yeah, totally. I mean, I've been, and the fact that I but I was doing a million other things at the exact same time, and I was depressed the entire time that I was writing the book. A little bit of a humble brag there. That my deep penetrating depression did not keep me from doing good work. And did not keep me from accomplishing something. But part of it was just that the work itself was less involved and less intense, and it's easier to write a 5,200 word blurb about something than to write a 2,000 word piece about it. But I think when people see how it all comes together, they will be very impressed.
Nice. Well, I can't wait. And thank you for joining me on the show.
Oh, it's my pleasure.